Hello and welcome back to the Be Schooled podcast. Today I'm sitting down with Anthony Ritz, our amazing director of test prep here at SBC, and he is going to talk about indicator words. Take it away, Anthony.
Oh, thank you so much, Stacy. And yes, I am. Indicator words, as some of you out there in test prep land may know, are incredibly valuable tools for anyone trying to achieve a high verbal score on either the GMAT or the GRE. And so I thought it'd be great to do a podcast and just kind of explain how they are, what they are, and how to use them.
Okay, so what are indicator words? I don't even know. So this is going to be an educational journey for me.
I'm excited. Indicator words are words in the English language whose sole purpose in existence is to let you know what part of an argument you're looking at. So basically, recognizing these words helps you break down and understand arguments. And there are a lot of questions on the GRE and especially on the GMAT, whether that's critical reasoning or reading comprehension, that involve the analysis of arguments. So there are a lot of places where it's really helpful to have these tools to break them down.
Okay, so can you give me an example?
Absolutely. Um, They're indicator words for all sorts of things. They're indicator words that indicate conclusions. These are some of the most important. If you see a word like therefore or thus or so or conclusion right after that, and you'll definitely want to perk up and pay attention. And then on the other hand, you have premise indicator words like because and since and for. And there are also indicator words for other things like counter arguments. But or however is a good example where you're going to be switching sides in the argument. There are even words for when you're about to switch sides, but not quite yet. So although or notwithstanding are examples. And when you say although, you're about to make a point, but then right after you're done, although this is true, comma, actually, and you go back to the other side. And of course, there are indicator words for simply doing more of whatever you were doing before. So also and furthermore and stuff like that. And I bet that whether you knew this term, indicator words or not, that most students are generally familiar with words like these and could probably guess what a lot of them do. But at the same time, a lot of students haven't learned to look for them and don't recognize their importance and really focus on them as they're doing critical reasoning questions. So one of the things we're going to do for you is we're going to put some of the most common indicator words in the notes for this podcast, as well as some tips on their usage. And I hope that'll be a handy tool for all of you watching or listening at home.
Okay, so what types of tips are we talking about, and can we dig into those tips in this conversation?
That would be great. So I'll throw a few of my favorites out there. And I think maybe my favorite of all is the curious case of the word however, and a few others like it in the English language. English is a funny language, and we normally speak from left to right and right from left to right, but not always. So the word however is a counter-argument word. It indicates, theoretically, an immediate shift from one side of the argument to the other. But in English, it turns out, because as I said, English is very strange, that we always treat the word however as though it were the first word of its sentence. So when we say, I disagree, however, or I, however, disagree, or however, I disagree, it's kind of all the same thing. I understand that the emphasis may shift a bit and we may focus on different things, but in every one of those cases, the however acts like it's the first word. The side switch between whatever I was saying on the other side of the argument and my current disagreement happens right at the beginning of that sentence, even though the however may not come until later.
Okay.
So, mhm. So I think that's a really important tip. It's tested kind of a lot on the test. It's a really good one to know. But I'd like to mention a few others. Moving on to my next tip, one of the things that catches a lot of students, there's going to be a lot of indicator words on the list I talk about, but there's going to be a small category of what I call fake indicator words, because there's some words that a lot of people assume are indicators and they're just not. For instance, a claim can be a premise, a conclusion, or something else entirely. It all depends how the claim is used. So you don't really want to rely on the word claim to tell you what part of an argument you're looking at. Also, when I was in law school, my legal research and writing professor absolutely hated the words clearly and obviously. She just hated them. Uh, and they always said, look, if it's actually clear or obvious, you don't need to use those words. Just make your statement and everyone will kind of nod in agreement. Oh, yeah, seems obvious, you know? So actually, those two words don't really indicate anything at all because they kind of are meaningless. They don't tell me whether I'm looking at a premise, a conclusion, or something else entirely.
Side note, that's a very good essay writing tip too.
It is. I
If
was
it's
always
clear
told
or obvious, you don't need to say.
exactly. I was always told to just cut those words out of my writing, and they just you take them out, your writing is so much stronger immediately. So definitely for those of you writing essays, my legal research and writing professor from law school would 100% approve of that message.
Okay.
Um, but another tip, sometimes, excuse me, sometimes you just won't have indicator words. Obviously, we're here to talk about the cases where you do, and most of these arguments will. But if you have an argument or a big chunk of an argument that just doesn't have any indicator words whatsoever, it turns out that in those cases, the conclusion will tend to be the first statement, and the subsequent statements will tend to be supporting premises in the case of no indicator words. Now, that's not a hard and fast rule, but I would say treat it as a handy guideline for those cases, and it can be very helpful to point you in the right direction.
Okay.
Now, I do have one final caveat before we move on from these sort of tips, and that is that a lot of words in English have multiple uses and meanings. And so we're going to talk about a lot of indicator words today, and they're no exception. Something that's an indicator word in one usage may not be an indicator word in another usage, so make sure you're thinking about how you're using it and what it's trying to mean. For instance, the word since can mean from then until now, or it can mean because.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And when I say since, as in since last night, I, whatever, that's not an indicator word.
Right.
Since last night I slept 8 hours. Okay. But if I say, well, since last night I slept 8 hours, I'm very well rested this morning, that's now like saying because last night. And that would actually
Mm.
be a premise indicator word. So it's, either a preposition or an indicator depending on how it's used. Another example would be while. While can mean although, which is an indicator word, or while can mean at the same time as, and that's not an indicator word. And on and on. There's many more examples. So just make sure you're thinking about how the words are used in context and, kind of think logically about whether they're trying to indicate something about an argument. And assuming you do that, then you can rely on some of the lists I'm going to give you and you can use these to good benefit.
Okay. That's a lot of good info. Are indicator words the main tool that you're using to break down arguments? Are they the only tool?
Well, they're certainly the one I'm talking about most today, and I think indicator words are great. They tend to be the first thing I notice when I'm trying to break down an argument, but I should grant they're not the only tool. They're kind of the 1A here. But we have a couple of other tools, and I'm going to mention them just briefly today, and maybe on some other day, on some other podcast, or in a lesson that we do, we can dig more into them. But one thing that we have is the Y test. And another that I'll provide is a general guideline about facts versus opinions. So first, the Y test. The idea here is that kind of by definition, a conclusion is a statement that's supported by other statements. That's what I mean when I say a conclusion. So if you're ever going through an argument and you're looking for a conclusion and you find something, you think, hey, maybe this is the conclusion, but you're not sure. Well, ask yourself why. Or, how do you know? I call it the how do you know test, but how do you know test just isn't as catchy, right? So,
Correct.
so we'll go with why test. And here's the thing. If the statement that you think is the conclusion isn't supported by any other statement, there's no other statement in the argument that even attempts to support your alleged conclusion, then what you're looking at isn't actually a conclusion at all. And on the flip side, even if your conclusion, your statement is supported and is some sort of a conclusion, if it then turns around and supports something else further down the line in the argument, maybe what you're looking at is a middle link in the chain. And we would call that an intermediate conclusion. But it's not going to be the argument's ultimate final conclusion if it's turning around and supporting something else. So we would say it's a conclusion, but we wouldn't call it the conclusion.
Okay.
The other tool that we have, I wouldn't lean too hard on at all. You know, if indicator words are 1A, this is like 3C down the line,
Okay.
but it is something that kind of is an 80-20 rule, which is to say that 80% of the time, it works every time. And the idea here is that statements of fact tend to be premises, whereas statements of opinion tend to be conclusions. That's usually true, and it's a good guideline. But as I've said, it's not 100%, so you should never use it in a vacuum. There's a lot of exceptions. For instance, there are a lot of scientific arguments where the conclusion is a factual statement. You know, blah, 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 big argument, therefore we conclude that this beetle uses starlight to navigate, which is essentially a statement of fact. On the other hand, there are plenty of philosophical and theological arguments where the premises are ultimately opinion statements. Well, we begin with the premise that God is good, or whatever. And even though it's a premise, it is still an opinion. So there are these exceptions, but the general rule does remain that more often than not, if you're looking at a statement, it's just stating a fact, pretty, you know, unexceptional fact, pretty inarguable. It's probably a premise. And if it's making a very statement that's very controversial or debatable, and it's saying you should do something, you ought to do something, something like that, more likely a conclusion. So breaking down the argument is going to be a mix of these tools. It's going to be indicator words first and foremost, but also the why test and maybe a little of fact versus opinion and maybe a little of just even reading the argument and thinking about what the actual content, believe it or not, of the argument is. And, you know, we start with the indicators, we use some of these things to further our intuitions, and the why test should clean up any lingering doubts.
Okay. Um, Helpful tips, but also abstract. I am particularly very out of practice on the GMAT. It's been like decades since I took it, and out of 740, which wasn't terrible at the time. But um,
Incredible. It's
can
a
you give
fantastic score.
can you give me a specific example of a question where you'd use the indicator words and how we would use them?
I would love to do a role question example with you, which I'm not sure if that's
Ah,
quite what you asked, but I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Look, uh, role questions are a really important critical reasoning subtype. They show up on both the GMAT and the GRE, and for that matter, they even show up on the LSAT for any of you LSAT people who've stumbled into this podcast somehow. And so I've got one that I brought in today, and I would love to have you try it. Now, this is going to be a little tricky because I know that it's important to really be able to see the question. And if you're listening to this podcast rather than watching the video, I know it's going to be harder for you to follow along. So we're going to do a couple different things here. We're going to put it up on a screen share here and leave it on the screen for those of you who are watching. We'll also put the full text of this question in the notes for those of you who are just listening. Hopefully you can pull up the notes somewhere and take a look at this. And I do encourage you to take a look at the actual text of the question when you can, especially if you're only listening on audio. And I also encourage you to, once we put the question up, take a pause, take 2 minutes, and, try the question on your own before we actually discuss it so that you can see how you do, and then you can follow along our discussion and compare notes with us. And this is an official GMAT question that I'm doing, by the way, and it's a hard one for what it's worth. This one is rated between 655 to 705 on the GMAT, according to GMAT Club, which is a really good site that I use a lot. One more thing, by the way, for everyone at home to know, Stacy, would you confirm? I'm doing this question with you totally cold, right?
Yes, and I'm gonna admit I am nervous about making an idiot out of myself and not getting this. This question is cold and I have not looked at a test question, as I said, in a very, very long time. So, oh boy. Okay, let's
Oh
do
my, this is going to be exciting. I mean, look, it might be a spectacular train wreck, but everyone loves to watch a train wreck, right?
it. Okay.
But the good news is, you're an incredibly intelligent woman. You have learned some of my tips about these indicator words.
Yeah.
And what I really want to show everyone at home is that that's about all you need. If you're an intelligent person and you follow the things I'm laying out, you can get really high level questions right. And so I believe, Stacy, that you're going to do absolutely great.
Okay. Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you for your confidence in me.
Okay. So I'm going to screen share now. I'm going to put up a question on the screen. Let me find my PowerPoint. Give me 1 second here. I need to close the sidebar so no one can see additional pages. Okay. Are you able to see this question, Stacy?
Oh, this is a long one. Yes. Okay.
So, for everyone at home who's just listening along, and again, I've encouraged you to take a look at the text in the notes, but I am going to read the question aloud. It's a little bit awkward, but I will read it and I will let you know where the bolding is before we do anything else. Okay? Okay. So the question starts. Historian. Newton developed mathematical concepts and techniques that are fundamental to modern calculus. Leibniz developed closely analogous concepts and techniques. It has traditionally been thought that these discoveries were independent. Researchers have, however, recently discovered notes of Leibniz's that discuss one of Newton's books on mathematics. Several scholars have argued that since the book includes a presentation of Newton's calculus concepts and techniques, and since boldface portion, the notes were written before Leibniz's own development of calculus concepts and techniques. End of the boldface. It is virtually certain that the traditional view is false. A more cautious conclusion than this is called for, however. Boldface portion. Leibniz's notes are limited to early sections of Newton's book, sections that precede the ones in which Newton's calculus concepts and techniques are presented. End of boldface, end of the argument. The question is, in the historian's reasoning, the two portions in boldface play which of the following roles? I will now briefly read the answers as well, and then I will have a little discussion with you, Stacy. Answer A. The first provides evidence in support of the overall position that the historian defends. The second is evidence that's been used to support an opposing position. B. The first provides evidence in support of the overall position that historian defends. The second is that position. C. The first provides evidence in support of an intermediate conclusion that is drawn to provide support for the overall position that the historian defends. The second provides evidence against that intermediate conclusion. D. The first is evidence that's been used to support a conclusion that the historian criticizes. The second is evidence offered in support of the historian's own position. And finally, E. The first is evidence that's been used to support a conclusion that the historian criticizes. The second is further information that substantiates that evidence. Okay, so that's
This
the
is
argument,
hard.
all the answers. That's okay. I'm going to
Okay.
take this in very small steps with you. And here's what I would like to do. The first thing, I don't want your answer. I don't want your reasoning of the whole argument. All I want to know is, do you see in this argument up here any indicator words, anything that we might have discussed or that would be on that list? Because I believe you also
Yes.
have the
So
list.
the word since is used as kind of a
Hmm.
because situation.
Did you mean this sense or did you mean this sense?
Oh, I meant the second one.
I would
Since,
accept either. They are actually both because
okay.
the
And
word
then
and
also,
is connecting them
yes.
together and saying I have two of these.
And then we also have the word however. I was looking, I see, I guess there are two, but I was
Uh-oh.
looking more at the
Two
second.
howevers again.
Um,
Okay, you are absolutely right. Is there
yes.
anything else that you'd like to point out at this time?
Um,
It's
no.
okay. Okay, that's great. You did a really good job. Those are the most important ones. The
Okay.
only other words that would be on my list at all that I might just throw in there as like a small bonus, again, you hit the big ones. But, the word false, anytime they directly tell you whether something is true or false, right or wrong, yes or no, it's pretty important to pay attention to. And I'll throw out the word conclusion. Obviously, if we're looking for premises and conclusions and they say conclusion, it's probably worth noticing.
Right.
So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to the next page, and I'm going to highlight on the next page. If I could get to the next page, I need my pointer back. Okay, there we go. I'm going to highlight all of those words. Okay, and then I'm going to do something really fun. I think this is too easy for you, Stacy. So I've taken the answers away, but I'm not done taking things away. I'm going
Okay.
to take away everything else, or almost. Okay,
Oh,
what
wow.
I've done
Okay.
here, I had all these words, and what I want to prove to you is that exactly two of them matter. Exactly two. And they're the two indicator words that are, in this case, directly beside our bolded portions. And I've left the bolding so you can see where it is, but obviously not what it says. Now, what I'd
Yeah.
like to
So
ask you,
I'm just for people listening, I'm looking now at the passage is gone. There's just the word since and however.
and some bolding, and that's it.
Yeah.
Since, bolding, another statement, period, another statement, comma, however, period, some more bolding. That's all we see. So what I'd like to ask you is, based on what you can see here, believe it or not, there is only one possible place in this argument, bolded or not, where you could possibly have the conclusion of the argument. This is a little tricky, but I'm wondering if you can figure out where the conclusion would have to be.
Um, well, it seems like it would be before the word since, because you would say, here's the conclusion since blah, blah, blah.
It's
The back.
possible. Another structure we use a lot is since, premise, comma, conclusion. So given
Okay.
that
So it
there's
could
a
be
comma here,
since this, here's the
mhm,
conclusion.
so maybe the conclusion is here. There's certainly
Before the
some
word.
kind of conclusion
Yeah.
there. But then I have to ask you, isn't the however a side switch? Doesn't that mean I'm switching sides?
Yes. I mean,
Do you think that I would give my big giant rah rah conclusion and then immediately switch sides and say however and tell you why I'm wrong? What do you think?
no. I mean,
Okay, I get that that's a little leading, but probably I wouldn't.
yeah.
Now I want to mention one other thing. Remember where I said the however always exists in a sentence?
It always, sorry, what?
Where is the however always going to be in a sentence, even if it doesn't look like it's there?
Oh, the beginning.
It always is treated like it's at the beginning.
Right.
This, however, that you see, it's not where it looks like it is.
Right.
It's there. It's at the start of that sentence. And so here's the thing. I would not have stated, here's my conclusion, and then the next word is however. That's not believable. So I think the conclusion has to come after the however.
Okay.
And if you had one more guess, where would that leave us looking for the conclusion?
The very end there that's highlighted.
Maybe the
Or not
last statement,
highlighted, that's bolded.
maybe the bolded statement,
Yeah.
or maybe the other statement that is the one that contains the however. Now,
Oh,
there's no further
yeah.
indicator words on that. So my guess is that it would be here. And my guess is because when you don't have any further indicator words after the however, you have a whole argument on that side of the argument,
Hmm.
however, and there's a whole argument there. No indicator words in that argument. And generally, in that case, the conclusion will be at the beginning. So if you put a gun to my head and said, look, you've got two words on the page, find the conclusion, that's where I'm putting it.
Okay.
Now, if that's the conclusion, as I suspect it is, well, let me actually not put that up just yet. But if that's the conclusion, then would the second bolded statement be on the same side as the conclusion or the opposite side? However, conclusion, another statement.
It I, it
It,
would.
we switch sides at the however, which is the first word of the sentence.
Uh-huh.
And it's the only time we switch sides. So if you think of, I'm on one side of the argument, I say however, I'm on the other side. I stay there. I don't switch again.
So it's the conclusion on the other side.
It's it's the same side as the conclusion.
Right.
Right. If the blue is the conclusion, then that second bolded portion is on the same side as the conclusion. It's almost certainly a premise that supports the conclusion.
Right, right, right. Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
And is the first bolded portion going to be on the same side as the conclusion or the opposite side?
Opposite.
Right. We said that's a premise, and we think it supports another conclusion that's over here. But we don't think that conclusion's on our side. We think that conclusion's against us. So I know this was very challenging. You've done a great job working through it with me. What we've gotten to is the first bolded portion should be a premise that is against us. And the second bolded portion should be a premise that is for us.
Okay.
And I think we can say that confidently with only two words showing. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay.
Of course,
Then
I
I'm going to
agree
show
with my
you.
teacher.
Well, all right. But you're also a very good student. But I will say, when I do these lessons with people, sometimes I do say something wrong and see if you agree, because I want you to be thinking. I want you to think for yourself and not just nod and smile.
Okay.
But in this case, that is the right answer. So let's take a look at the answer choices. Now, this is a whole challenge unto itself. Whoops, right here. The two portions in boldface play bleh, the two portions in boldface play which of the following roles? A says the first provides evidence in support of the overall position that the historian defends. Do you think that is an accurate description of the first bolded portion?
No,
No, because why not?
because right afterwards he says, however. So
Yeah,
he's,
we're not defending that position.
yeah.
That might be evidence. It might support something, but what it's supporting is not what I'm defending.
Hmm.
Absolutely not.
Right.
And so on the next page, we can see that that answer is, in fact, very wrong. It's actually quite backwards because the first is supporting a position that we oppose, and the second is supposed to support what we defend, and A says both of those in the opposite way.
Hmm.
B starts, the first provides evidence in support of the overall position of the historian. Wait a minute, I think I read this already. Deja vu. Historian defends.
No.
Same problem, right? It's exactly the same wording.
And it says, however, so it wouldn't be the same position again.
Right. Yes. We would be on opposite sides, not the same side because of the however. Okay, let's go through C. The first provides evidence in support of an intermediate conclusion, a lot of words here, that is drawn to provide support for the overall position the historian defends.
Well, it is in support of an intermediate conclusion,
Is
but
it the one that supports what we defend?
the overall position, no.
No. Again, it's actually the same problem. In C, again, we're saying, look, this statement is supporting us, but we know that's wrong. The statement is not supporting us. The however tells me I'm going the other way. It has to be wrong. It has to.
Yeah.
So I don't even need to read the rest of C, but I will. The second provides evidence against that intermediate conclusion. Eh, that could work. I mean, it is evidence against whatever the first bullet is doing, but I'm already dead, so it doesn't really matter. The first part of C is unacceptable. Okay, D. The first is evidence that's been used to support a conclusion that the historian criticizes.
Correct.
Absolutely. And by the way, E starts out the same way. The first is evidence that's been used to support a conclusion that the historian criticizes. Incidentally, we already said, where is that conclusion the historian criticizes? Well, oops, it's, I jumped ahead too fast. It's here. The second is evidence offered in support of the historian's own position.
Yes.
Absolutely, that was a premise supporting our conclusion. So we know that D should be correct. I know I accidentally turned the page for a minute, so hopefully I didn't spoil it for everyone, but it is correct. But briefly, let's take a look at E just to make sure we're not missing anything there. Starts out the same. The first is evidence that's been used to support a conclusion the historian criticizes. We already said we like that. The
Hmm.
second is further information that substantiates that evidence. No,
No, because of
because
however.
again, once again, it's amazing what one word can do for you. If you just simply ask the question, which of these answers say that the two statements are on opposite sides, you could immediately eliminate B, E, I think just those two. But then if you further say that first one is against my conclusion as well, you can eliminate A and C. And
Yeah,
so it
that's
has to
so
be.
interesting. Yeah,
And we did this with two words. I know there were some small hiccups here. First time doing it, that's to be expected. You still did an amazing job. And there is the right answer.
very cool. Yes,
Okay.
that makes a
So
lot of sense. I want to go do another one, but we'll do it
absolutely. You should
off the
all,
podcast.
everyone out there, I hope this was sort of exciting. I hope that this inspires you to say, wow, I wonder what else I can do with this tool and this technique because I think it's an amazing tool. I will say not every question can be solved quite that cleanly. There are other tools, as I talked about, you may also need to bring to bear, but there are several that I considered for this podcast where literally you just need to see two words and nothing else matters. And this is an
Amazing.
example.
Um, so this is one that would be great to watch as opposed to just listen to.
Hmm?
And we will definitely supply a link to the document that you created that is just a resource for these words and this tool. Um, Fun for me because I'm not actually taking the GMAT. It's kind of just like a puzzle.
Oh,
And it's interesting to go back and look at it. But
I love these
hopefully test
tests.
takers can have some fun with it too.
I love these tests. I think they are puzzles. I think that for test takers as well, if you can find the fun in them, you'll probably really enjoy your studying a lot more. You'll probably do your studying a lot more, and ultimately you'll probably do much better on the test. So I think it's great to try to find what's really interesting about these and really lean into that.
Agree. Thank you to our test prep genius guru, Anthony. Thank you for taking the time and preparing all of that and for the free giveaway that we're gonna distribute. Um, yeah, I hope everyone found that to be helpful.
As always, it's my pleasure being here. Thank you so much for having me, Stacy.
Thank you.